The phone buzzed in my hand, and I glanced down. It was a text from Emily. I hesitated before opening it. She'd been distant lately, and we'd barely spoken since the last family gathering. But this was different. "Can we talk? It's about us. I think it's time." My stomach twisted. I knew what was coming. I'd known for a while, but seeing the words on my screen made everything feel real. I took a deep breath and called her. "Hey," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the anxiety creeping up my spine. "What's up?" "I've been thinking a lot," she began, her tone light, too light for this conversation. "And I think we need to have a friendly divorce." Friendly divorce. The words hit me like a punch in the chest, but I didn't show it. I'd been bracing myself for this. After all, Emily had been emotionally checked out for months. The long, late nights at work, the weekend trips without me, the cold silence after our fights. It was all leading to this moment. "Friendly," I repeated, trying to keep my voice neutral. "What exactly does that mean?" She sighed, a little too exaggerated, like she was preparing to break the news gently, as though I was the one who needed the softening. "It's not that I don't care about you," she said, her words carefully measured. "But I think we're better off apart. I've been thinking about this for a while, and I think it's time to make a clean break. You know, no hard feelings." I felt the blood rush to my ears, but I kept it together. "Right?" I said, glancing at the couch where she had sat just this morning, pretending everything was fine. "So, no drama? You're just done?" "Yeah," she said quickly, too quickly. "I've already been thinking about what's next for me, and I don't want to drag this out, you know?" I stared at the wall in front of me, the reality of her words sinking in. She wasn't offering a path forward, wasn't suggesting we could work through things. She was offering a way out, a clean break. And in her mind, it was all just a practical decision, like picking a new restaurant to eat at. I couldn't hide the edge in my voice when I spoke again. "So you're just leaving? No fight, no conversation, no trying to fix things?" She was quiet for a second. "I don't want it to be messy," she said, finally, almost pleading. "I want us to go our separate ways, amicably. We've had our time, and I think we've outgrown each other." Outgrown each other. My heart felt like it dropped into my stomach. I had always known something was off, but hearing her confirm it, hearing her just throw us away, neatly packed and ready to be forgotten, it stung worse than I thought it would. I took a breath and surprised myself. "Fine. If that's what you want, then I'm in. I'll start the papers." She hesitated, like she hadn't expected me to agree so quickly. "You're not upset?" "No," I said, surprising myself again. "I'm not." There was a long pause. I could practically hear the wheels turning in her head. She wasn't expecting this, wasn't prepared for me to be so calm, so detached. "Well," she said, her voice faltering for the first time, "are you sure? Because I was thinking we could try counseling, or—" "No." I cut her off, my tone sharper than I intended. "It's done. I'm done, too. I'll start the paperwork." I hung up before she could say anything else. I put the phone down slowly, taking in the silence that followed. This was it, the end of everything. And somehow, I felt nothing. It wasn't relief. It wasn't anger. It was just emptiness. I knew the emotional fallout would come. It always did. But right now, in this moment, I was simply done. And Emily? She would have to deal with the consequences of her actions. I wasn't going to be her emotional backup anymore. A couple of minutes passed before the texts came in. A flurry of them. "We can talk about this, right? Maybe we just need a break, not a divorce?" I didn't reply. Instead, I stared at my phone. It was clear she wasn't ready for the reality she was trying to create. I wasn't the one holding things up anymore. I was done playing the emotional fool. The next few days were a blur of paperwork, logistics, and awkward phone calls. She kept reaching out, offering suggestions to make it work, like she was surprised that I wasn't desperate to fix everything. But there was nothing left to fix. The moment I agreed to the divorce was the moment I stepped away from her manipulations. No more playing the role of the emotional backup. I would handle this on my terms, and Emily would have to live with the fallout of her choices. And for the first time in months, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I was taking control. The divorce process began with an eerie calmness that almost felt wrong. As soon as I agreed to the friendly divorce, I knew what my role had to be. I was going to handle this like a business transaction, like something that didn't deserve an ounce of emotional involvement. I couldn't let Emily manipulate me into being her emotional backup anymore. This was the end, plain and simple. Every morning, I sat at my desk and filed away divorce papers, making sure every detail was correct. Emily's messages kept popping up, but they didn't bother me the way they used to. The texts came through with regularity, casual, as if we hadn't just made this monumental decision about our lives. Hey, did you figure out how we're splitting assets? I think I left my code at the house. Can you check? Would you be open to counseling? I know we said we're done, but I don't want to make this harder than it has to be. I read each one and responded with simple, direct answers. No emotions, no explanations, just cold, practical responses. Yes, I'll check on the code. I'm working on the asset division. And when she suggested counseling again, I simply replied, I've made my decision. Her attempts to keep things friendly started to feel more like a fishing expedition. She wanted a reaction. She wanted me to care, to hesitate, to show some weakness. And each time, I refused to give it to her. I didn't care anymore. I was tired of being the person who tried to fix everything. I wasn't going to play her game. Days passed, each one more methodical than the last. She sent texts to check in on the progress of the divorce. Each message sounded increasingly desperate, as if she hadn't expected me to be so cold, so unaffected. Her voice became softer in the texts, almost pleading. I just don't want us to end up bitter. We should be able to part on good terms, right? But I didn't budge. I simply replied, we've already made the decision. The more I stayed calm, the more frantic she seemed to become. The more I worked through the logistics, the more she tried to insert herself into the process. When she started asking me about mutual friends and family, trying to figure out who was on her side or mine, I didn't entertain it. I'll handle everything, I'd reply. There were moments I felt the urge to throw it all away, to allow the emotions I'd bottled up to come rushing out. But I held fast. I wasn't about to let her see that side of me. I wasn't going to show her how much it hurt. The weeks dragged on. The divorce paperwork went from vague ideas to concrete plans. Emily texted less, but she still tried. She still couldn't let go of the idea that I would break down and beg her to reconsider. But I didn't. I couldn't. She reached out through mutual friends, asking if I was doing okay. But I stayed distant. I responded only when I had to, keeping things brief, and never offering her the comfort or emotional connection she so clearly wanted. It was the end. She had asked for it, and now she would get it, without drama, without tears, just business. And while she floundered, looking for any sign of weakness from me, I pressed forward. I wasn't interested in reconciliation. I wasn't interested in making it easier for her. The only thing I cared about now was finishing what we had started, sealing the deal, and moving on. She wanted a friendly divorce, and that's exactly what I was giving her. No mess, no emotion. Just the cleanest break I could make. It had been a couple of weeks since the divorce papers were finalized, and already, my life felt more like mine again. I had set the process in motion with little more than a sense of quiet finality, keeping everything simple. As Emily's texts became fewer and farther between, I had time to breathe, to step back and reclaim what was mine. But what surprised me most was how quickly I started finding my own peace. I was no longer tethered to the anxiety of our failed marriage. I wasn't focused on the logistics anymore or on her emotional needs. For the first time in a long time, I could focus on someone else. Her name was Sarah. I'd known her for years, an old friend from the same social circle. She'd always been the kind of person who noticed things others didn't, the kind of person who asked questions that weren't meant to fill the air with noise, but to truly understand. That was something I hadn't realized I missed until I spent more time with her. I had seen Sarah around occasionally, at parties, mutual gatherings, events. She was friendly, genuine, and had always been one of those quiet souls who could get to the heart of any conversation without seeming intrusive. We reconnected over coffee one afternoon, no agenda, just two people sitting down after years of shared history. There was no rush to fill the silence, just an easy flow of conversation. The more we talked, the more I realized how different it felt to be with someone who actually listened. Someone who didn't need me to be her emotional backup or play the role of her therapist. There were no strings attached, no expectations, just a connection that felt simple, honest, and, honestly, like a breath of fresh air. But Emily? Emily didn't seem to like that I was moving on, even though she'd been the one to suggest the divorce in the first place. She texted me once, then twice, and on the third occasion, I could almost hear the frustration creeping into her words. Hey, just wanted to make sure everything's going okay with you. Haven't heard from you in a while. Let me know if you need anything. I read the message, my finger hovering over the screen. There was a time when I would have felt obligated to reply immediately, to assure her that everything was fine, that I was okay. But now, I didn't feel the need to offer anything. I wasn't her emotional caretaker anymore. Instead, I typed a simple response. I'm fine. Thanks for checking in. Short, direct, and emotionless. I didn't know her more than that, and frankly, I was getting tired of being her emotional safety net. Later that week, Sarah and I met up again. The more time I spent with her, the more I realized how much I had needed this. Real, no-strings-attached companionship. We started sharing little bits of our lives, nothing heavy, just casual chats about work, hobbies, and everything in between. It felt comfortable, natural. Meanwhile, Emily's attempts to reach out only grew more frequent. But each time, I deflected, staying polite but distant. She didn't need to know about my life anymore. And yet, she kept asking, subtle, almost like fishing. Did you meet anyone new? Are you seeing anyone yet? I replied minimally, always sticking to the truth without giving her anything to latch onto. Just focusing on myself. That was the most I offered. I knew what she was doing. She wasn't just checking on me. She was trying to gauge whether I was moving on, trying to stay involved in my life in some way, hoping I'd slip up and reveal more than I wanted to share. She wanted to be part of my story, even if it was as a casual friend, someone who still had a hold over me. But I wasn't giving her that satisfaction. In the quiet moments when Emily's messages became more desperate, I reminded myself of the space I had carved out, of the way Sarah's friendship was helping me rediscover who I was without the weight of my past marriage holding me back. That felt like freedom, like living again. As I sat across from Sarah in a quiet cafe, sipping coffee and discussing everything and nothing, I realized I hadn't felt this relaxed in years. There was no pressure, no manipulation, just an easy rhythm to our conversations, and it was exactly what I needed. But Emily? She wasn't happy about it. Every little interaction felt like another attempt to drag me back into a past that was long gone, but I stayed firm. No more emotional manipulations. No more worrying about her comfort or guilt. I had moved on, and she had to accept that. And just like that, the contrast between my past and my future couldn't have been clearer. My future was sitting across from me, smiling, laughing at a joke I had just made. It was simple, it was honest, and it was exactly what I deserved. The first time Emily called after I started seeing Sarah, I didn't pick up. I had already made the decision to leave my past behind and move forward, but Emily still clung to the idea that she could somehow keep me emotionally tethered. Her messages came in fast after the missed call. Hey, I get it. You're moving on, but I don't want us to lose the friendship. I'm just checking in. Let me know how you're doing, okay? I didn't reply immediately. It felt like she wanted a response, any response, but I refused to give her one. Each time I saw her name pop up on my screen, I felt the old tug, the one that had kept me stuck for so long. But this time, I wasn't about to let that happen. Instead, I just focused on what mattered. Sarah, the peaceful calm I felt when we were together, and the life I was starting to rebuild for myself. I kept things light with Sarah, no pressure, no expectations. She was a breath of fresh air after months of suffocating under Emily's manipulations. Still, Emily's frustration was palpable. It started to show in the way she reached out through mutual friends. Hey, have you talked to him lately? Do you know what he's up to? Is he dating someone? I could see the desperation in her messages. She wasn't just curious about my life anymore. She was trying to figure out if Sarah was a real threat, if she was going to permanently take my place. I never gave her the satisfaction of any real answers. Instead, I kept the boundaries clear. I'm doing fine. No need to worry about me. I'm focusing on my own life now. Her messages slowed down after that. But then, in the dead of night, when I was already halfway asleep, my phone buzzed with another text from Emily. This time, there was a distinct edge to her words. It's been weeks. You're really moving on, aren't you? I thought we were supposed to be friends. How could you just leave everything behind? I stared at the screen for a long moment, feeling the weight of her words and the tone behind them. There it was, the crux of it all. She wasn't just frustrated. She was scared. Scared that I was slipping away for good. Scared that I wasn't coming back this time. I paused for a long time before typing back, keeping it simple. It's over, Emily. It's time for both of us to move on. Please respect that. She read the message, and the three dots appeared, then disappeared. The silence that followed felt thick. I knew she was thinking of how to respond, but I didn't care. She was no longer in control of this situation. She couldn't manipulate me anymore. The next few days were quieter. I had almost convinced myself that she had finally accepted that I wasn't going to feed into her games anymore. Then, out of the blue, I received a call from one of her friends. I'd known them both for years, but we'd never been close. Still, when the phone rang, I picked up, curious. "Hey, I'm sorry to bother you, but Emily's been really upset. She said you two haven't talked in a while, and she's worried about you." The voice on the other end was tentative, like they weren't sure whether I'd be open to the conversation. "I'm fine," I said, my tone even. "I'm doing what I need to do. Please tell Emily not to worry about me." There was a long pause before they replied. "I don't think she's worrying about you. I think she's worried about losing you. As a friend, you know?" I didn't respond right away. There was so much to say, so many ways I could explain that this wasn't about losing a friend. It was about taking control of my life and leaving the toxicity behind. But instead, I just said, "I understand. But I'm not going back. I'm moving forward. She needs to accept that." The call ended with a polite goodbye. I knew Emily was probably spiraling, but I had done what I needed to do. I had set the boundaries. I had drawn the line. As the days passed, I focused more and more on Sarah, on the lightheartedness we shared. The more time I spent with her, the more I realized how much I had been missing, how much I had been denying myself by staying in that marriage. She valued me for who I was, not for what I could do for her. That was a rare gift, and I wasn't about to let it slip away. But Emily's desperation didn't stop. She wanted to know how I was moving on. She wanted to know if I was seeing someone else, and more than anything, I knew she wanted to find a way back into my life, to reclaim her position in my world. The harder she tried, the more resolute I became. I wasn't going to let her drag me back into the emotional chaos I'd spent so long trying to escape. It wasn't about punishing her. It was about reclaiming my peace. And nothing, not even her manipulative tactics, was going to change that. I was done, completely done, and nothing was going to pull me back into her orbit. It had been a few months since the divorce was final, and Emily's attempts to keep a hold on me had become less frequent. I had made it clear that I was moving on, and for the most part, she had started to accept that. But there were still moments, small moments, that made it clear she wasn't fully ready to let go. The local event was the first time Sarah and I went out in public as a couple. It was a casual gathering, just a community event at the park with music, food trucks, and vendors, but it felt like a milestone. The kind of milestone I hadn't had in a long time. With Sarah, everything felt natural, calm. There was no pressure, no games, no manipulations. It was real, and that felt new to me. As we walked through the park, laughing at something ridiculous I'd just said, I noticed a familiar figure across the crowd. Emily. She stood near the food truck, talking with some of our old friends. Her gaze immediately shifted to me, and then to Sarah. Her face didn't give much away, but the slight furrow in her brow was unmistakable. She wasn't happy to see us. She wasn't happy to see me moving on, but the surprise was written all over her. She hadn't expected it. She hadn't expected me to do anything more than wallow, to beg for her to come back, or at the very least, to allow her to remain some kind of emotional backup in my life. But there I was, standing with Sarah, my hand casually draped over her shoulder, enjoying the moment without a care. Emily's eyes darted back and forth between Sarah and me, but I didn't flinch. I wasn't interested in her discomfort. I wasn't interested in her emotional manipulations anymore. This was my life now, and Sarah was a part of it. As we made our way to the beverage stand, Sarah chatted excitedly about something trivial, her voice lifting and falling in that familiar way that made me feel heard. But I noticed Emily moving closer, positioning herself just a little too close to our group. She had joined the conversation, her tone light, but her eyes darting to me in a way that screamed she was trying to reclaim control. "Hey," Emily said, her voice barely masking the tension. "I didn't know you two were, doing this." Her smile was tight, forced. Sarah smiled politely, the warmth never leaving her voice. "Yeah, we've been spending some time together. It's nice, isn't it?" The slight edge in Emily's demeanor was clear, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Her face twitched with frustration, her eyes flicking between Sarah and me like she was trying to gauge if this was something she could control, something she could undermine. I let the silence stretch, refusing to fill it with anything. Emily was the one who had ended our marriage, who had manipulated me into staying emotionally tethered for so long. And yet here she was, trying to make herself a part of my life again. But I wasn't going to let her. She eventually made a forced comment about the event, about how the park had changed since the last time we had all been here together. Her attempt at maintaining normalcy was transparent, and the desperation was palpable. I didn't engage. Anyway, I said, casually turning my attention back to Sarah, have you tried the tacos here? They're amazing. I wrapped my arm around Sarah's shoulders again, just to make sure the point was clear. This was where my attention was now, and Emily wasn't part of it anymore. Emily faltered for a moment, clearly unsure of how to regain control, but after a moment of uncomfortable silence, she simply nodded and made her exit. Her back stiffened as she walked away, and I could see her stewing in the distance, already starting to realize she wouldn't get the emotional response she had expected from me. And that was fine. She wasn't entitled to it anymore. Sarah and I continued our evening, unbothered, enjoying the rest of the event with ease. I didn't feel the need to explain anything to her or to anyone. This was my life, and for once, I wasn't letting anyone dictate it. It was a Saturday afternoon when the barbecue happened, one of those casual gatherings where people showed up in flip-flops, drinks in hand, and everyone was just there to have a good time. The weather was warm, the smell of grilled food wafting through the air, and Sarah and I were mingling with some old friends, catching up on everything that had been going on in our lives. I was at ease, completely relaxed for the first time in months. Then I saw her, Emily. At first, I thought maybe she had just come to enjoy the barbecue like everyone else. But as her eyes locked on mine across the yard, I realized that wasn't the case. She had come to make a scene. I wasn't the only one who noticed. Sarah, standing next to me, felt the shift in the atmosphere too. She looked at me, then at Emily, her eyes narrowing slightly. Emily, on the other hand, couldn't seem to stop staring. She moved closer to us, and I could see the tension in her body. She wasn't trying to blend in. She was trying to reclaim control, to drag me back into her orbit. She opened her mouth, but Sarah spoke first, ever the calm presence. "Hi, Emily," she said, her tone polite but firm, giving nothing away. I could feel the heat of Emily's gaze, and for a split second, I considered ignoring her, pretending like she wasn't even there. But no, this was something I had to face. Emily had gone too far, and now she needed to realize that I wasn't hers to control anymore. "Hi," Emily said, her voice a little too sharp. "I didn't expect to see you two here together." Sarah's smile didn't falter. "It's a public event, Emily. We're just enjoying the afternoon." I could feel Emily's discomfort radiating through the space between us. She clearly didn't know how to handle this situation, how to handle the fact that I was standing here with someone who truly saw me. Emily's eyes flicked back to me, narrowing as she crossed her arms. "You know, I thought we agreed to keep things amicable," she said, her voice a little more defensive. "But this isn't really respectful, is it?" I could feel Sarah tense up slightly beside me, and I knew that Emily had struck a nerve. But she wasn't going to get a rise out of me. "Respect," I said, my voice calm, almost too calm. "Respect is something that works both ways. And you," I gestured to Emily, "have already shown me everything I need to know." There was a long pause. Emily's eyes flicked between Sarah and me, a slight tremor in her jaw betraying her frustration. She wasn't getting the response she wanted. She wasn't going to get the emotional reaction she expected. "You really think you can just flaunt this in front of everyone?" she asked, her voice tight. "You're acting like I don't matter, like I never did." I met her gaze, unflinching. "I'm not flaunting anything," I replied. "I'm just living my life. You made your decision, Emily, and now I'm making mine. I'm moving on, and I'm done hiding it." Her face flushed, her grip on her drink tightening. "I didn't think you'd be this cold," she spat. "After everything. After we were married. This is how you repay me?" "Repay you," I said, my voice cutting through the air. "You don't get to manipulate me anymore. You've already walked away. And you don't get to come back and make demands now." The crowd around us had started to quiet, some of the onlookers pretending not to notice, others shifting uncomfortably. Emily's face went red, her eyes searching for a way to turn this around, but I wasn't having it. You can't just pretend like I don't matter, she said, her voice rising in desperation. You can't just erase everything we had. I shook my head, my patience wearing thin. It's not about erasing anything. It's about moving forward. And you don't get to keep me tied to the past anymore. Her face twisted in anger, and she took a step back, clearly struggling to regain control of the situation. She knew the crowd was watching. She knew she wasn't going to win this. Without another word, she turned on her heel and stormed off, her exit punctuated by a slam of the backyard gate. The tension in the air evaporated almost immediately, but I could still feel it, a mixture of disbelief and relief. I turned to Sarah, who was watching the whole interaction unfold with an unreadable expression. You good? I asked, wanting to make sure she was okay. She nodded, giving me a small smile. Yeah, just. I'm glad you stood your ground. I nodded back. It wasn't easy, but I had to. Emily's behavior was no longer going to be tolerated. The rest of the afternoon passed without incident. Emily's outburst had only made one thing clear. She was losing control, and no matter how hard she tried, I wasn't going to be pulled back into her world of manipulation. I was done, and this time, I was standing firm. It had been weeks since Emily's last outburst at the barbecue. The dramatic confrontation hadn't just been a turning point for me. It was the final wake-up call. I had done everything in my power to be civil, to offer her the closure she seemed to want, but it became painfully clear that she wasn't interested in peace. She was interested in keeping me tangled in her web, still a part of her story, and I couldn't allow that anymore. I blocked her number. It felt like the simplest decision I'd ever made. It wasn't just to silence her constant demands for attention. It was to regain my peace, my space. The last thing I needed was to feel obligated to respond to every text, every call, every email. And blocking her felt empowering, like I was finally stepping out from under her shadow. Within days, she had reached out on social media. Another attempt to pull me back into her orbit, hoping to get any reaction. But she was met with the same indifference. I blocked her on every platform. No messages. No reminders of what we'd shared. I had already begun thinking about a new chapter. Sarah and I had been talking about a fresh start, somewhere far enough from the past that it wouldn't shadow our future. A new city, a clean slate. There was a calm sense of freedom that washed over me when I discussed it with her. She was on board. We didn't need to talk about it endlessly. We both knew it was the right choice. A place where we could grow, build something together without the weight of old connections. Meanwhile, Emily spiraled. I could feel it. Her messages, though fewer now, carried the weight of desperation. She wasn't used to being ignored. She wasn't used to not having a hand to reach for when she felt alone or confused. But that was no longer my problem. It had taken a lot to get to this place, but I was finally free. The final blow came when I spoke with mutual friends who had once kept a foot in both worlds. They had been kind enough to reach out, almost apologetic for Emily's behavior, asking if there was any way to smooth things over. I listened, but I wasn't interested in hearing excuses for her. The old me, the one who would have bent over backward to accommodate her feelings, was long gone. I'm done, I said simply. I'm not going back to that. The silence on the other end of the line was telling. They understood. There was no convincing me otherwise. Sarah and I started making serious plans about relocating. It wasn't just about putting physical distance between me and Emily. It was about severing all the emotional ties that had kept me anchored in a toxic space for so long. We didn't talk much about it with anyone, just the two of us, dreaming of a new life, in a city that would be ours. We had both been carrying baggage for far too long. It was time to drop it. By the time I packed up my things, the only thing I could feel was relief. The thought of waking up each day free from Emily's influence, free from the weight of the past, it was liberating. No more wondering if I was being manipulated, no more worrying about her controlling my emotions. It was just Sarah and me, embarking on something new. I didn't look back, not even once. Emily, on the other hand, was left behind, unable to grasp that I had made my final decision. I imagined she was still trying to salvage something, but it was too late. I had moved on completely. There was nothing left to give. As Sarah and I drove off toward our new beginning, I couldn't help but feel a sense of finality that was both empowering and peaceful. The weight of my old life, of my failed marriage, had lifted. And now, there was just the promise of something better, a future built on real connections, free from manipulation and games. For the first time in years, I was living life on my terms. And that felt more than enough. The moving truck had pulled up the day before, and now, as I sat in a small, cozy cafe in our new city with Sarah, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of relief. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind, packing up the last remnants of my old life, finalizing the move, and taking that first step toward freedom. The weight of everything that had come before seemed to evaporate as I sipped my coffee, looking out over the quiet streets of this new place. The city felt different, brighter, somehow. It wasn't just the physical distance that gave me a sense of calm, but the emotional one. In this new city, there was no past to remind me of mistakes or manipulation. There were no old routines that had been tainted by my previous life. It was all fresh. The possibilities felt endless. Sarah smiled at me over the top of her cup. She could tell, even without me saying a word, that I was finally embracing what had been so hard to accept before. This was my life now. We didn't need to talk about it constantly. It was enough to feel it. "This place is perfect," Sarah said, her eyes bright. "It's a new beginning for both of us, don't you think?" I nodded, my fingers wrapped around the warm mug. "Yeah, I do. I didn't realize how much I needed a fresh start." She reached across the table and took my hand in hers, the simple touch grounding me. "It's going to be a good chapter. We've got this." And it felt like we did. For the first time in so long, I wasn't burdened by Emily's manipulations, by the mess we had created. Everything felt clean now. Every move we made together, every step we took, was ours. No one else's. The city buzzed outside, but in that moment, it felt like we were the only ones in the world. I felt a peace settle deep inside me, something I hadn't known in years. For so long, I had been tethered to the past, to the expectations and the guilt that came with it. I had lived in a world where I couldn't make a move without wondering how it would affect her, without worrying about her responses, her feelings. I had been emotionally exhausted, caught in a cycle of manipulation I didn't even realize until it was too late. But now I was free. I thought about Emily briefly, but the thought didn't linger like it used to. She was no longer part of my world, no longer able to reach in and tug at my emotions. She had made her choice, and so had I. I was done trying to fix things that were beyond repair. I had already let go. It was time for her to figure it out, just as I had. We walked back to the apartment afterward, a small but bright space we were slowly making our own. Each room was filled with the newness of possibility. The old furniture, the boxes half unpacked, it was all just stuff. What mattered was the life we were building here, together. And as we stood in the doorway of the living room, taking it all in, I felt a deep, unspoken connection with Sarah. This was it. This was the kind of partnership I had always needed, one where mutual respect and understanding came first. There were no hidden agendas, no games to play. Just us, figuring things out together. It wasn't just a new city, it was a new life. A life free from the chains of my past, where I could finally be myself, without fear of manipulation, without the constant tug of someone else's unresolved needs. "I'm glad we're here," I said quietly, looking over at Sarah. She smiled, her eyes warm. "Me too. And there's nowhere else I'd rather be." I squeezed her hand, and for the first time, I felt fully at peace. The past was gone, and the future was ours to shape. It was an exciting, terrifying, and beautiful feeling. As the sun set over the horizon, casting a golden light over our new life, I realized that I had made it. I had broken free, and with Sarah by my side, I was finally free to live, truly live, for the first time in years. This was just the beginning, and I couldn't wait to see where it would take us.